I checked our security camera at 2:13 a.m. The man on my couch wasn't a stranger. The notification sound woke me up. Just one soft chime from my phone on the nightstand. I almost ignored it. We live in a quiet neighborhood. The motion alerts usually come from headlights passing by or the neighbor's cat cutting across the driveway. But something made me reach for it. 2:13 a.m. Motion detected. Living room. I frowned. Claire wasn't home. She told me she was staying at her sister's that night. Said she needed space. We'd argued earlier. Nothing explosive. Just tension that had been building for months. She grabbed a small overnight bag and left around 8:30. The house should have been empty. I opened the app. The live feed loaded slowly, buffering in that irritating spinning circle. Then the picture cleared. The lamp in the corner was on. I don't leave lamps on. My chest tightened. The camera angle showed the edge of our couch, the coffee table, the hallway entrance. For a few seconds, nothing moved. I almost convinced myself it was a glitch. Then a shadow crossed the wall. Someone was there. I leaned closer to my phone. A man walked into frame. Calm, casual, like he belonged there. He sat down on my couch. My couch. He leaned back and stretched his arm across the cushions like he'd done it 100 times before. I didn't recognize him at first from the angle. The lighting was low. Then he turned his head slightly, and my stomach dropped. It was Ryan, my neighbor, the guy who helped me install the damn security system. The same guy who came over for Sunday football. The same guy who stood in my kitchen 3 weeks ago laughing with Claire while I grilled outside. I felt my pulse in my ears. This didn't make sense. Claire wasn't home. Why was Ryan inside my house at 2:13 in the morning? I switched to the driveway camera. His truck was parked across the street. Lights off. He hadn't pulled into my driveway. He didn't want it obvious. My hands started shaking. I switched back to the living room feed. Ryan looked toward the hallway, waiting. For a second, I considered calling Claire, but something told me not to. Then I heard it, faint through the camera's built-in mic. Footsteps. From the hallway that leads to our bedroom. My throat went dry. She stepped into frame, barefoot, wearing the oversized gray t-shirt she sleeps in. The one I bought her last Christmas. She wasn't at her sister's. She never left. She'd waited until I fell asleep. Waited until the house was quiet. Then let him in. I watched her walk toward him like this was routine. No hesitation. No guilt. She didn't look nervous. She looked comfortable. Ryan stood up. They didn't talk at first. They just stared at each other for half a second. Then he grabbed her waist, and she kissed him. Not quick. Not unsure. Slow. Deliberate. Familiar. My entire body went cold. I couldn't even feel anger yet. It was like my brain refused to process it fully. I kept watching. She laughed softly at something he whispered. The same laugh I heard in our kitchen. The same laugh she used to give me. He brushed her hair behind her ear like he'd done it before. Because he had. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't their first time. I checked the camera history. Scrolled back. 2 nights ago. 1:48 a.m. motion detected. I tapped it. There he was again. Different shirt. Same couch. Same lamp turned on. My stomach twisted. I kept scrolling. Last week. 12:57 a.m. Again. He knew exactly where the blind spots were. Because I showed him. I'd proudly walked him through the system when I installed it. See. This one covers the hallway. This one gets the front door. This one records audio. He must have known I rarely checked it unless there was a reason. And Claire? She must have assumed I'd never think to open the app while she was supposedly gone. Back on the live feed, Ryan pulled her closer. They moved out of camera frame toward the hallway, toward my bedroom. I stopped watching. I just sat there in the dark, staring at my phone screen long after it went black. The betrayal felt layered. Not just her. Him. The neighbor. The friend. The guy who borrowed my tools and returned them with a 6-pack. The guy who looked me in the eye every single day. And this wasn't some hotel across town. This was my house. My living room. My couch. 2:13 in the morning. I checked the time again. 2:26 a.m. They were still in there. I could drive home right now, I thought. I was only 20 minutes away. I'd fallen asleep at my office after working late. That's why I wasn't home. That's why she thought it was safe. I could walk in, catch them in real time. But then what? Screaming? Police? Neighbors watching? No. I needed to understand how deep this went. I opened the archived footage again. 2 months back. Nothing. 3 months. Nothing. Then 4 months ago. Motion alert at 11:03 p.m. Ryan standing awkwardly near the door. Claire opening it. That first night looked different. Nervous energy. More distance between them. The progression was clear. Started small. Then grew comfortable. Then bold. Bold enough to use my house while I was gone. My phone buzzed suddenly. A text from Claire. Hope you're sleeping okay. I stared at it, disbelief turning into something sharper. She sent that while he was in my bed. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched one more clip from last week. They were sitting close on the couch, talking. I turned up the audio. He trusts us, Ryan said. My chest tightened. Claire replied quietly, he doesn't even check the cameras. They both laughed. That laugh echoed in my head. He doesn't even check the cameras. I locked my phone and leaned back in the office chair, heart pounding hard now. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't drunken. It wasn't emotional confusion. It was calculated. They felt safe, comfortable, untouchable. At 3:04 a.m., the driveway camera lit up again. Ryan leaving. Claire walked him to the door. She kissed him one more time. Then she turned off the lamp. And the house went dark. Like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't sitting there watching the entire thing unravel in real time. I finally breathed out slowly. They thought I was clueless. They thought I was asleep. They thought the system I installed to protect our home was just decoration. They had no idea I'd seen everything. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry yet. I was calm. Too calm. Because I realized something important in that moment. They didn't just betray me. They handed me the advantage. And they had no idea I was about to use it. I didn't go home that night. That's what they would have expected. A furious husband bursting through the door at 3 a.m., catching them half-dressed, screaming, maybe swinging. That would have made it easy. Instead, I stayed in my office chair until the sun started bleeding through the blinds. I replayed the footage 3 more times. Not because I wanted to torture myself. Because I wanted details, patterns, timing. If they were bold enough to use my house, that meant they felt secure. And if they felt secure, they'd been doing this longer than the camera history showed. At 6:42 a.m., Claire texted again. Morning. I'm still at my sister's. Might stay another night. I stared at the message for a full minute. Still at my sister's. She had just walked a man out of our front door 3 hours earlier. I typed back, take your time. Then I drove home. When I walked inside, the house smelled faintly like her perfume. The lamp in the living room was off. The couch cushions slightly misaligned. Tiny things. If I hadn't watched the footage, I would have missed them. I walked into the bedroom. The sheets were changed. Fresh set. Tucked neatly. That detail hit harder than the kiss. She planned for this. She prepared for this. I checked the laundry hamper. The gray t-shirt was gone. Washed probably. Erasing evidence I already had. I didn't confront her when she came home that afternoon. I kissed her cheek. Asked about her sister. Listened to the fake story about wine and late-night movies. She maintained eye contact the entire time. That's when I understood something dangerous. She wasn't sloppy. She was confident. And confidence comes from repetition. That night, while she slept next to me, I logged into the security system's admin panel. There's a feature most people don't know about: secondary hidden storage. Backup cloud sync separate from the main user view. Ryan definitely didn't know about that. Claire definitely didn't either. I created a new encrypted archive. Every clip, every timestamp, every audio snippet. Then I did something else. I adjusted the notification settings. From now on, any motion detection between midnight and 4 a.m. would silently forward to a private email account she didn't know existed. No alerts on the home screen. No visible notifications. They would think nothing changed. But I would see everything. 2 nights later, it happened again. 12:58 a.m. Motion detected. Driveway. I didn't move. I didn't even shift in bed. I just waited 5 minutes, then quietly rolled over and checked my phone under the blanket. Ryan's truck. Same routine. Park across the street. Lights off. Claire waited exactly 3 minutes before walking to the door. They had a system. I watched him step inside. Watched her lock the door behind him. Watched them move toward the couch again. But this time something was different. They weren't whispering. They were relaxed. Comfortable. Ryan stretched out like he owned the place. Claire curled up against him. I turned up the audio. "He's been distant lately," she said. My jaw tightened. Ryan chuckled. "Maybe he suspects." She shook her head. "He's not that sharp. Not that sharp." I felt something inside me shift. Not heartbreak. Not even rage. Precision. If they thought I wasn't sharp, they'd never see the trap. Over the next week, I played the perfect husband. Cooked dinner. Initiated date night. Complimented her. I watched confusion flicker across her face once when I brought her flowers. Guilt, maybe, or suspicion. Either way, she didn't stop seeing him. In fact, she got bolder. Thursday night, 2:07 a.m. Bedroom camera, disabled. I frowned. I checked the system logs. Manual override from primary user account. Claire's login. She had learned just enough about the system to disable specific feeds. But she forgot one thing. The hallway camera wasn't on her list. At 2:11 a.m., I watched her guide him down the hallway. Not to the living room, to our bedroom. I felt my pulse spike for the first time since this started. They disappeared into frame. The audio from the hallway picked up muffled laughter. Then silence. I closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't just a fling. This was desecration. And yet, I still didn't confront her. Because now I understood the full picture. This wasn't just physical. They were building comfort, routine, attachment, which meant exposure would hurt more. The next morning, I checked Ryan's social media. Married, 2 kids, family photos everywhere, smiling, barbecues, beach trips, the perfect suburban image. I wondered if his wife knew. I wondered if she'd ever checked their cameras at 2:13 a.m. That afternoon, I invited Ryan over. Just like old times. "Beer tonight," I texted him. He responded almost immediately. "Sure, man." When he walked into my house at 7:04 p.m., he looked relaxed, confident. Claire was in the kitchen. She froze for half a second when she saw him standing there in daylight. But she recovered quickly. Too quickly. We sat on the couch. The same couch. I handed him a beer. Our fingers brushed for a second. He didn't flinch. I watched his face carefully. No guilt. No fear. Just casual familiarity. "You too good?" he asked me, nodding toward Claire. "Yeah," I said calmly. "Better than ever." Claire's smile looked strained. I let silence hang a little too long. Then I said something that made both of them stiffen. "Security system's been glitching lately." Ryan's eyes flicked toward the corner camera. "Yeah," he said carefully. "Yeah, been catching some weird late-night activity." Claire laughed lightly. "Probably raccoons." "Maybe," I replied. I held his gaze for 3 full seconds. He didn't look away, but I saw it. A crack. Just a small one. That was enough. Because now I knew something else. They thought they were ahead, but they were starting to feel watched. And once paranoia creeps in, people make mistakes. I just needed to wait for the right one. I didn't scream when I saw his face clearly for the first time. That was the part that scared me the most. Not the fact that a man had been sitting on my couch at 2:13 a.m. Not the fact that he clearly had a key. Not even the fact that he looked comfortable, like he'd been there before. It was that I recognized him. And instead of panic, what I felt was something colder. Betrayal. Because the man on my couch wasn't a stranger. He was Daniel's brother, Mark. The same Mark who had toasted at our wedding. The same Mark who hugged me at Christmas. The same Mark who once told me, "If Daniel ever hurts you, you tell me." I kept watching the footage over and over, zooming in on his face until the pixels blurred. He walked in casually. No hesitation. No forced entry. He didn't search the house like someone nervous about being caught. He knew no one would be home. He went straight to the couch, sat down, waited, and then, 10 minutes later, Daniel walked in. My stomach flipped. Daniel wasn't supposed to be in town. He told me his flight to Chicago was delayed until morning. But there he was on camera at 2:24 a.m., stepping inside quietly, locking the door behind him. He didn't look surprised to see Mark. They didn't greet each other like brothers reuniting. They looked like partners. Daniel dropped his overnight bag by the door. Mark stood up. They spoke. No audio, but their faces were tense. Daniel ran a hand through his hair the way he does when he's stressed. Then Mark handed him something. A folder. I leaned closer to my screen until my forehead nearly touched it. Daniel opened it, flipped through papers, shook his head. Mark grabbed his shoulder. And then Daniel did something that made my chest go hollow. He started crying. Not subtle. Not quiet. He buried his face in his hands like his entire world had just cracked open. Mark pulled him into a hug. A long one. And I realized something even worse than cheating was unfolding. This wasn't an affair. This was a secret. A big one. The next morning I didn't say anything. I acted normal. Made coffee. Asked about Chicago. Daniel lied easily. Long night, he muttered. Flight was chaos. I watched him carefully. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Later that afternoon I texted Mark. We need to talk. Alone. He replied almost immediately. About what? You know what? He came over that evening. Daniel was at the gym. Mark stood in my kitchen looking like a man walking toward execution. His jaw tight. His hands clenched. How long? I asked quietly. He didn't pretend. 3 months. My pulse pounded in my ears. 3 months of what? He swallowed. Of him knowing. The room felt too small. Knowing what? Mark looked at me the way you look at someone right before you break them. You should have been told the truth. Then tell me. He hesitated only a second. Daniel didn't go to Chicago 3 months ago, he said. He went to a specialist. My stomach twisted. For what? Mark exhaled sharply. Fertility testing. The word hit harder than I expected. You told him you wanted to start trying. Mark continued carefully. He agreed, but he panicked. So he went to check if everything was okay. I felt like I was falling through the floor. And Mark's eyes softened. He can't have children. Silence swallowed the room. I laughed once. A hollow, confused sound. That's not funny. I know. He would have told me. Mark's voice dropped. He didn't want you to leave. That sentence cracked something open inside me. All those late-night mood swings. The distance. The sudden business trips. The withdrawn sex. The way he'd changed the subject every time I mentioned babies. He's ashamed, Mark said quietly. He thinks if you know, you'll resent him. Or find someone who can give you what you want. Tears blurred my vision. So instead he lies? I whispered. Sneaks around? Makes me think he's cheating. Mark stepped closer. He's drowning, okay? He didn't know how to tell you. He's been trying to figure out options. Treatments. IVF. Donors. He didn't want to come to you empty-handed. The folder. The crying. The 2:13 a.m. meeting. It wasn't betrayal. It was desperation. But that didn't make it hurt less. That night I confronted Daniel. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I simply turned my laptop toward him and played the footage. He went pale. "You followed me?" he asked hoarsely. "I protected my home," I replied evenly. "Now tell me the truth." He stared at the screen, at himself breaking down in his brother's arms. And then he broke again. He told me everything. The diagnosis, the shame, the fear that I married him expecting a family he might never give me. "I thought you'd look at me differently," he whispered. "Like I wasn't enough." I walked toward him slowly. "You let me think you were cheating," I said. "You let me spiral for weeks." "I was going to tell you," he choked. "I just needed a plan first." I studied him, this man I loved, who was flawed and scared and deeply human. "You don't get to decide what I can handle," I said softly. "We're supposed to be a team." He nodded, crying openly now. For a long moment I didn't know what I would choose. Leave? Stay? Demand therapy? But then I realized something. He hadn't betrayed me with another woman. He betrayed me with silence. And silence can be fixed. Trust can be rebuilt, slowly, painfully, if both people are willing. "I'm angry," I told him honestly, "and hurt, and you don't get to rush me through that." "I won't," he said. "But if we do this," I continued, "we do it together. No more secret meetings at 2 a.m. No more letting me believe the worst." He nodded again, desperate. "And one more thing," I added. He looked terrified. "If we ever have a child, however it happens, I want them to grow up knowing that their father fights fear instead of hiding from it." That broke him. He pulled me into his arms like he thought I might disappear. And for the first time in months, I felt like we were actually facing the same direction. It's been 6 months since that night. We're in therapy. We're exploring options. Some days are heavy. Some days are hopeful. But I still think about 2:13 a.m. How close I came to believing the wrong story. How easy it would have been to walk away without knowing the truth. And sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't checked that camera, would he ever have told me? Or would silence have destroyed us completely? If you were in my place, would you have stayed? Or walked away the moment you saw that footage? Let me know in the comments. And if you're into real, messy relationship stories that make you question everything, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.